Hello students, we were studying Raymond Williams, Advertising the Magic System, and we will continue with that. So we were actually discussing history in the previous slide. Now continue with it. Town criers. So who are these town criers? That is in ancient Egypt and Greece. Merchants used to hire town criers. So town criers are a group of professional criers to walk through the streets and announce the arrival of ships and cargo. So you can assume this image as town criers. And history of advertisements, if you see, this runs parallel to the history and development of press. So advertising actually reaches people through various forms of mass communication. And these media include newspapers, magazines, television, radio, internet, etc. And the newspapers, they started to devote more space to advertisements than to news stories. And this is one of the oldest poster of newspaper advertisement. And advertisement in those days, and for several decades later, primarily meant to inform readers. So thus advertisement in newspapers and periodicals, if you see, those days they informed only births, deaths, and sometimes even arrivals of ships from England, sale of household furniture, etc. to the readers. So the use of the word advertising in everyday language and in the popular press appeared around the middle of the 17th century. And a handful of newspapers emerged in the major cities of England and America by the first quarter of the 15th century. And ads in these papers, they promoted a series of goods and services to the potential buyers. And soon there emerged agents who obtained advertisements from clients for newspapers and periodicals on a commission basis. So these agents were known as space sellers. And these space sellers were actually the forerunners of the present day advertising agency. And advertisements during those time, were marked by the use of the thick and bold headlines and sometimes dark prints and monograms. So those days it was ads were a matter of fact, that is functional advertising that worked through repetition. But soon these advertisements were soon become mountebank and huckster had got into print, giving ads a more specialized meaning. Mountebank is a person who deceives others, like a charlatan, a dishonest person. So soon that was transformed by mountebank and the huckster. Huckster is a publicity agent, a person who goes door to door to sell products, and ads giving ads a more specialized meaning. And next, second stage, which is discussed in Raymond Williams' Advertising the Magic System, is development. So this is the second stage. Industrial revolution and the revolution in communication actually changed the nature of advertising. The general increase in advertising was because of the abolition of a long-standing advertisement tax and stamp duty. And still, in the 1850s, advertising was mainly of a classified kind. And this condition was summarized by a local newspaper that they said that advertising was resorted to for the purpose of introducing inferior articles into the market. That argument was rejected by another newspaper, and they said that competition was the soul of business and advertisement was a fair, legitimate and respectable means of competition. This is what stated by another newspaper. And probably the first nationally advertised product was Warren's shoe blacking. So that was the first nationally advertised product, Warren's shoe blacking. And second product is Roland's massacre oil, and followed by Spencer's Chinese liquid hair dye, and Morrison's universal pill. So these were the early advertisements. And in the 18th century, the crowned heads of Europe were even being signed up for testimonials, and they were called upon to give testimonials. And moreover, along with the newspaper, poster industry also started to develop. And this UKPA, which means United Kingdom Poster Association, was created to support, help and promote the work of UK poster artists. And the advertisement vans and vehicles of all sorts crowded the streets. So thus the streets of, if you see the streets of Victorian London in the early 19th century were completely flooded with handbills, placards and sandwich boards. I will share the image of an inspiring public posters which was popular during early 19th century. And the circulation of newspapers rapidly increased, but the newspaper editors were extremely, they were resistant to resort to any sort of breakup in the column layout of their pages. And advertisers, they tried in many ways to get around this, but it was vain. It ended in vain. And the patent food and the patent medicines also technically belongs to this period. Patent food like Govil, Nestle, Cadbury, Kellogg's, Fry, Hovis, etc. And as the poster industry flourished, pressure on newspapers started to grow to adapt new techniques. So the change came first in magazines with illustrations like the crop of purity nudes, girls delighted by cigarettes or shop or shampoos, and catchy phrases were used by Pierce soap, which is popular even today. So first time Pierce soap used catchy phrases, and adjectives were being used. They started to use adjectives. Then it introduced the bubble, that is Pierce soap introduced the bubbles. So advertisements from simple persuasion using quack or puffered statements became an organized trade. Thus, newspapers like Daily Mail and The Times dropped their column rule and allowed large lithographs and illustrations in their newspapers. And we are moving on to the next section, that is next part of the essay, the third one, which is called transformation. So the fully developed new advertising, it appeared between the wars, that is the Great Depression between the years 1875 to 1890 is the depression year, and that was also dominated the period. So after the depression, there was a great fall in prices and a monopoly capitalism was clearly evident. So the crucial thing, advertisers, Protection Society Incorporated, Society of British Advertisers, Advertising Agencies, Association of British Advertising Agents, Audit Bureau for Circulations were formed. So during this period, advertising started to use human emotions and tensions. So these industries, they started to persuade people by emotional appeals. Emotional appeals or psychological acts, and emotional acts, they actually appeal more than function appeals. Ads started to point out our flaws, and it confuses the real cultural values by misdirecting the masses through persuasive communication instead of informational communication. And these confident absurdities were ridiculed by critics critics like Huxley, Russell, Lewis, and Thompson. They stated that children should be trained to study ads critically, and this paved way for the formation of a code of standards, that is ads, in the year 1950. So you can see misleading ads, which promises fairness after using a particular brand of product. So after 6 weeks of using this particular product, so you can see that the image, the transformation of the image here, which is not practically possible. So all these are false promises. And I stop here. Next we will see in next class. Thank you.